Hey there, I'm Adrienne, transformation coach and your go-to gal for navigating grief and loss. On this show, we're not shying away from tough conversations. Let's talk about how we're really feeling and how to show up in our lives even though so many hard things have happened. Loss and grief are tough topics, but witnessing each other's pain and getting really honest about what we want our lives to look like in our next chapter is the way forward. You're not broken. You deserve happiness. And even though you might not think that's possible, or even feel like your life is over, I'm here to show you that you can feel peace, purpose, and joy again. Let's talk about all things change, loss, and grief, and how to move forward so we can create a life we love. Welcome to the Living with Loss podcast. Hey there, welcome to Living with Loss. I'm Adrienne. So today we're going to talk about a really important conversation to have with ourselves. It's all about getting real with ourselves. And we're going to be exploring the idea of what's working in our lives and what's not working in our lives. When we're going through difficult times, whether we're grieving, we're just in the midst of a really challenging season, we can get very caught up in the emotions that we're feeling, the low energy that we have, and we could stay very stuck in those stories. We don't necessarily look for what's working or even really acknowledge what's not working. We just kind of stay in this pattern that oftentimes feels stuck or again might feel low energy. So if you find yourself in that place where you're grieving, it's a difficult time for you, give yourself a pause. Build in some time for reflection. Taking this time for yourself will be huge in the long run. It might be difficult to do right in the moment, but it's really important work to do. If you just lost somebody yesterday and you are in the midst of that very raw, deep pain, whether somebody died or you got that diagnosis or your pet just passed, whatever your loss might be, if that just happened and you're super emotional and really in that deep grief of the early days, this probably isn't the best exercise for you. If you've been in a tough season for a while, if you're in grief and you're starting to ask yourself what's next, or you wish that you had the capacity to ask yourself that, but you're starting to get curious, then this is a really good thing to work with. One of the things that I believe, and this isn't because I read self-help books or, I go to conferences or because I have a coach or anything like that. It's because of the difficult times that I've gone through in my life. When you're in the midst of a challenging time, when you're in the midst of loss, you have a choice. You can let those really big, difficult emotions drag you down and control your life, or you can choose to move forward, creating a life that you love despite the challenges. Sometimes people don't want to hear this, especially if they're grieving, they're in the midst of that challenging season. The last thing they want to hear is you can choose something different. But truly, I believe that. You can't choose all of life's circumstances. You can't choose all of the things that happen to you. But you can control your attitude and you can control your action. And again, these are things that I've adopted that I fully believe because of the challenging things that I've been through. If I let every difficult thing, every loss in my life break me, I wouldn't be where I am today. There are challenging moments. There are those days, right, where you cry a lot. Maybe you don't want to get out of bed. You just feel like you can't get yourself to do anything. Those days will still happen, even when you're very far removed from the loss. But those days don't have to be every day. There's a choice. Again, if your loss was yesterday, it was super recent, this isn't what you want to hear. But as you get a little bit further removed from your loss, meaning it happened a while ago, yeah, it still hurt. It's always going to hurt. There's always going to be emotion when you've lost something or someone. But that doesn't have to stop you in your tracks and make you live a life that you don't want to live. You may have lost the vision that you originally had for your life, but you can create a new vision. You may have lost your identity, the way that you saw yourself in the world, the way that you oriented yourself around other people. You can create a new identity. None of these things are easy and they don't happen overnight. But the thing is, you can choose to move forward. in small steps, in small ways, in moments of reflection, in digging deep, in getting to know what is true for you now, where you are now, after all the hard things have happened. What's true for you now? I do believe that in order to move forward, in order to create a life we love after hard things have happened, we have to have really honest conversations with ourselves because you're not the same person that you were before you experienced your loss. You're just not. You know this, right? People want you to be the same. People will sometimes act as if there's something wrong with you when you don't show up in the same way. But of course, you're not the same. Loss changes you. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. But having honest conversations with yourself allows you to figure out who you are now in this moment and who you want to become. So, this conversation that I'm going to encourage you to have with yourself about getting real with yourself, about what's working and what's not working, this will allow you to get clarity around the impact of what's working in your life and what's not working in your life. It's an acknowledgement of what's working and what's not. And really, when you get honest with yourself, when you acknowledge what's really, really good and what is challenging, that creates opportunities for growth. It creates opportunities for change. So you might be wondering, how am I supposed to have this conversation with myself? The way that I do it is through journaling. I have said it a million times. I will always say it. Writing has saved my life again and again and again because I can be myself on paper. I can pour out my deepest, darkest, ugliest, most ungenerous thoughts on the page without worrying about anybody judging me. And we all need that. So I do it with journaling. And it allows you to see it in front of you, right? When you put your thoughts on paper, they're out of your head, they're in front of you, they're tangible, they're easier to make sense of. They also hold a bit less power. Like if you're acknowledging the things that are challenging, the things that are not working, you might have this really big story around it about how it's impossible to change it, about how it just is. But when you put it down on paper, you can almost see it from a different angle. So I would encourage, again, journal this exercise, write it down. The best way to do that is to find a spot where you're not going to be bothered, a safe, private space. Maybe that's somewhere in your home. Maybe you take a walk. Maybe you go do it somewhere outside that feels comforting. Only you can know what that space is for you. But somewhere where you could really get comfortable and not be distracted. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to journal this, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to have the conversation with myself. Another tip is as you're writing what's working and what's not, it can be easy to get caught in the story of the why it's working or why it's not working. Or if this was different, then this would be different. Instead of just acknowledging the thing as it is that's working or not working, you create a story around it. We don't want to get lost in the narrative. We especially don't want to get lost in the negative narrative. This isn't meant to be a complete bitch fest. While it's helpful to just kind of like stream of conscious, write everything down that's bothering you, the purpose of this exercise isn't to get lost in that negativity. It's to just objectively look at the things that are working in your life and not working in your life. So we're not dwelling, we're acknowledging. And the way that we're going to get real with ourselves, first, get real about what's working. And this looks like identify the positive aspects of your life. What are the things that you're doing, that you're experiencing, that you're feeling, that you're creating, that are allowing you to feel the way you want to feel? Whether it's bringing you joy, it's peace, it's comfort, whatever that might be. What are the feelings that are the higher vibe feelings for you right now? The more quote unquote positive feelings, the things you want to experience. What are those things? So you can make a list, write them out, however you want to do that. Don't forget when you're making this list, celebrate your strengths, right? What's working? You're working out. You don't want to put those gym clothes on, but you are working out. You're going for that walk. You're getting in your 10,000 steps. You really want to eat the cupcake, and sometimes it's good to eat the cupcake, but for the most part, you're actually eating really healthy, nourishing foods, right? Whatever it is that you're doing, like you're really taking care of yourself, acknowledge that. What's bringing you joy in this moment right now? What are your favorite ways to unwind, to relax? Explore all of that. So you want to just really go through everything that's working in your life. And maybe these things aren't happening every day, but you're like, you know what? Last week this happened and I want more of that. Write it down. So you might be wondering, why is this so important? Well, when you recognize what's working, you can amplify what's working. When you get really clear on the things that are good in your life, that you're happy about, again, that are bringing you joy, that are bringing you comfort, that are enabling you to feel the way that you want to feel, you can intentionally create more of that once you know what is working. And by recognizing and amplifying what's working, you're building a foundation of resilience. And by that, I mean, when times are getting really challenging and things are really difficult, you can come back to this list of what's working. Because sometimes, when you're in the midst of grief or challenging times, you can kind of get in this little bit of a fog or a haze where the things aren't as clear. So you could revisit this list. It builds a foundation of resilience. It's something for you to come back to. When things are challenging, it gives you a list of what can I do now to feel the way I want to feel. Another thing is when we're going through challenging times, when we've lost something, when we've lost someone, when there's an unexpected, unwanted change in our lives, things can feel so out of control. And that's because things are out of control, right? We can't control what happens to us. We can't control the circumstances of the world, even though we wish we could. But we can't. But by focusing on the positive, on what's good, on what's working, on what is allowing you, enabling you to feel what you want to feel, it'll light a fire under you, right? That motivation that you're looking for, it'll give you that. And also, it'll give you a sense of control when everything else is out of control. Because again, we can't control what's outside of us, but we can control our attitude and we can control our action. So by creating this list, it gives you things that you can focus on to change your attitude and to put you into action. And when those things happen, when you're actively creating how you want to feel, when you're actively moving towards something you want, you feel more in control. Okay, so you have your list of what's working. We're going to shift gears and we're going to get real about what's not working. So this looks like identifying the areas of your life that are causing stress, that are causing pain, dissatisfaction, that drain you when you're doing them or when you're experiencing that, you feel low energy. You want to look at everything that's not working when you're doing it, when you're experiencing it, when you're in the presence of it. You've got that feeling bubbling up where that's not where you want to be. That's what you want to do. That's the stuff you want to acknowledge. And the thing is here, again, we're not getting lost in the narrative. We're not getting lost in the story. We're acknowledging these issues without judgment. It's easy to be like, well, I'm eating poorly, which is giving me low energy. Well, if only I would keep the promises to myself and take more time for myself and plan my meals and follow through, then I wouldn't feel that way. We're not doing that. We're not judging ourselves. We're not getting lost in a story about why we're doing it. We're just acknowledging the things that aren't working. Kind of that non-judgmental observer, taking a step back and just documenting what isn't working. So the reason this is so important is because getting really honest about what's not working is the first step to making changes. It's really easy to kind of be going with the flow, let life happen, be weighed down by all the circumstances, everything that's being thrown at you, and think, well, I wish things would be different. I wish things would be different. If only this were different. We don't even know what we want to be different. We're just like, I just want things to be different. Well, what do you want to be different? I don't know. This list gives you a tangible list of things that you've acknowledged are not working for you. It gives you a starting place. We're acknowledging the problems without getting lost in the negativity. We're not beating ourselves up here. And the reason, aside from self-love and self-compassion, are super important to our healing, that aside, when you can just acknowledge, like as the non-judgmental observer, take a step back, that helps you stay solution focused. Because when that dialogue in your brain starts running away from you and telling the story and firing you up with all of this negative emotion or difficult emotion, and now all of a sudden You're not just making a list, you're pissed off. You're angry, you're frustrated. Maybe you're crying. Not that there's anything wrong with crying. But when you get into these stories, it takes you out of the exercise. It takes you away from what you're trying to do. So we're just acknowledging the problem without getting lost in the story because we want to stay solution focused here. Because again, maybe you don't have all of the solutions for how you're going to change these things in this moment. This is that first step of getting clarity around what's not working. But this process in itself can reveal actionable steps to improve your situation and support your healing journey. If you write down, I'm scrolling a lot when I get into bed, and then my mind is racing and I can't sleep. Okay, well, you've just identified something that's interrupting your ability to get a good night's rest. Maybe you're doing it unconsciously. Now that it's there and you can see it, you can choose something different. I went on a little bit of a tangent, right? If you get lost in the story, all of these emotions can bubble up. And truly, there is nothing wrong with emotions, with feeling big feelings. That is all part of going through difficult times. It's all part of change, of loss, of grief, having a tough day, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But to really objectively see what's working and what's not working, it's helpful to stay out of that charged emotional state. But sometimes easier said than done, right? I'm not talking at you as if like I haven't sat down to be objective or make a plan or acknowledge some things in my life where my mind doesn't run away from me and I'm fighting with my boss from 3 weeks ago or whatever, right? Like when I was still working for an organization and you're replaying that conversation and you're like, well, if I only said this, or, like you could just get caught up in that stuff. So whatever it is, right? You do happen to get caught up in that narrative. Your self-talk is running away from you. You're playing out a story in your mind. And all of a sudden you're feeling all of these emotions, big emotions. What do you do? First thing, just take a break. Step away from it. I find the easiest way to change your state, like very, very quickly, is by changing your breathing. So maybe practice some deep breathing. One of the easiest tools, 3 deep breaths. 3 really deep breaths ground you. You have to be focused on that inhale, on that exhale, and it takes you out of your mind, out of that story, out of that emotion. It helps. The other thing is you can go to like a mindfulness technique, which might be looking around the room that you're in or looking around where you're outside. What are 5 things that I can see? What are 5 things that I can feel? 5 things I can hear? And then it's kind of forcing you to get out of the story in your mind and be present where you're at. And it can allow those emotions to pass through you. For an emotion to pass through you, typically it takes 90 seconds if we allow it to pass through us. So by taking a step back, doing some deep breathing, doing some mindfulness exercises. Another thing is maybe just get up, dance, shake it out. That can help. It helps you from being overwhelmed by the emotions that are coming up. Another option is if you've found yourself trying this exercise multiple times and it just gets to be too difficult, or you're having a really hard time identifying what's good and what's not good, and you're just kind of in this spot where you're just not seeing it. This is where working with a coach could be helpful. A coach can walk you through this, ask you questions to draw out information in a way that you've never even thought of it. Can really get you to look past kind of that surface level obvious stuff and dig deep into the feelings and the sensations. And that could be so helpful. Can help you identify the limiting beliefs as those stories do come up. And they can help shine a light on the stories that might be getting in your way. I view coaching as it's this loving and compassionate relationship. It's a partnership where really they help you understand what's preventing you from having a life you love. And then once you know what's preventing you from having a life you love, helping you create it. I hope this conversation has been helpful for you. This is a really great exercise, again, for getting real with yourself, having an honest conversation with yourself. When you recognize what's working in your life, you can amplify it. You can create more of it. When you recognize what's not working in your life, you can change it. You don't have to stay stuck. I hope this tool or this exercise serves as just something that helps you get clarity, becomes a tool for growth and healing for you. If you don't already have a regular journaling practice, I encourage you to try and start doing that. Whether it's you focus on specific exercises like this, or you do something like Julia Cameron's morning pages, where you write the 3 pages, stream of consciousness, empty your mind in the morning, whatever method you want to do, if you're going through a challenging time, it will help you so much, truly. So I encourage you to try the exercise and share your experience. And if you're not already on my email list, getting my newsletter every week where there's actionable tips for you, there's stories, that's where I share about my life, get on that list. And if you go over to my website or click in the show notes below, www.adriancrowley.com, you can download a free guide that I have. It's 5 tools for relief from your grief, even when you don't think that's possible. There's something in that guide that will help you essentially move through those emotional states that can make the day-to-day very challenging during challenging times. So I encourage you to check that out, download it, get on the list, and I'll send you all sorts of good stuff every week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being part of this community, and I hope you have a wonderful week. Until next time. That's it for today's episode, my friends. Thanks so much for joining me on the Living with Loss podcast. Please like and follow the show so you don't miss an episode. If you're looking for more grief support, grab my free guide, 5 Essential Tools for Immediate Relief from Grief, even if you don't think that's possible. Head on over to adriancrowley.com and download it. Remember, you may not have chosen all the changes or losses in your life, but you get to choose what happens next. New episodes drop every Wednesday. Until then, have a fantastic week.